It started with a trembling kitten, her cries echoing through the room. But then, a massive German shepherd rushed forward, wrapping her in a protective embrace, refusing to let anyone near. When the vet finally discovered why the dog was so protective, he collapsed in tears, and you won't believe what he found. It was a chilly autumn morning when the local animal shelter received an unexpected call. A passerby had found a stray kitten alone by the side of the road, trembling in the cold. The shelter staff, always ready to help, hurried to retrieve the tiny creature. When they arrived, their hearts ached. The kitten was no bigger than a coffee mug, its fur matted and damp, and its small body shivering uncontrollably. They named her Willow, a delicate name for such a fragile soul. As soon as Willow was brought inside, she began to cry, soft, pitiful mews that echoed through the shelter halls. No one could figure out why she was crying so persistently. She was fed, cleaned, and checked, yet her tiny voice never wavered. It was as though she were pleading for something no one could provide. Among the shelter's longtime residents was Max, a large German shepherd with soulful eyes and a gentle nature. Max had been at the shelter for nearly 2 years after being found abandoned. He was known for his quiet, watchful presence and his uncanny ability to sense distress in others. When the staff brought Willow into the common area, Max's reaction stunned everyone. He approached the kitten cautiously, his ears perked forward, and then, without hesitation, he lay down beside her. Slowly, he wrapped his large, protective frame around her shivering body, pulling her close. It wasn't just a comforting gesture. It was as if Max was shielding her from an invisible danger no one else could see. The moment Max lay down beside Willow, the room fell silent. Even the staff members, who had grown used to his gentle demeanor, were struck by the intensity of his actions. He didn't just curl protectively around the kitten, he pressed his snout against her tiny head, letting out a low, comforting whine. It was as if he were whispering that everything would be all right. Willow's mews, while still soft and persistent, seemed to grow less frantic. Her tiny body trembled less with each passing moment as Max's warmth enveloped her. It was clear that the little kitten had found an anchor in Max, something familiar and soothing amidst the unfamiliar surroundings of the shelter. The other animals watched quietly, almost reverently, as if understanding that something deeper was unfolding before them. As the minutes turned into hours, Max remained steadfast by Willow's side. He licked her fur gently, his actions so tender that it brought tears to the eyes of the shelter staff. Volunteers whispered to one another about the bond they were witnessing, something unspoken but powerful. Willow, once trembling and inconsolable, nestled deeper into Max's embrace, her cries softening into tiny hiccups of exhaustion. The staff noticed something else that set this scene apart: Max refused to leave Willow's side. Not even for food or water. He remained with her, resting his head beside hers, his breath slow and steady, as if syncing his heart with hers. It was a moment so profound that even the most seasoned caretakers were moved to quiet contemplation. It was as if Max understood something none of them did, something hidden beneath Willow's tiny frame that only his instincts could detect. The staff exchanged puzzled glances. Could Max be sensing something that none of them could see? As Max continued to wrap his body protectively around Willow, the shelter staff exchanged uneasy looks. One of the volunteers, a young woman with a soft voice, crouched down and tried to coax the kitten into her hands. But Max let out a low, warning growl, not threatening, but firm enough to make her pause. The staff had never seen him this adamant before. Realizing something was deeply wrong, the shelter manager, Susan, called Dr. Patel, the trusted veterinarian who had worked with their shelter for years. He arrived within minutes, his face lined with concern as he observed the unusual scene. Max's behavior puzzled him. He approached slowly, speaking softly to both the dog and the kitten. "Hey there, big guy, let's take a look, okay?" But Max wouldn't budge. His large brown eyes remained locked on Willow, his tail unmoving, his body a shield. Dr. Patel's gentle hands finally coaxed Max to shift just enough to examine the kitten. He carefully lifted Willow, whose tiny frame shivered despite his warmth. Her eyes, glassy and sad, stared up at him. At first glance, nothing appeared severely wrong. Her breathing was shallow but steady, her body underweight but not dangerously so. But her constant, plaintive cries made Dr. Patel's heart ache. He gently pressed her tiny chest and felt the subtle, irregular thump of her heartbeat. Something was off, but it wasn't clear what. Max, now standing nearby, whined again, his body tense and alert. Dr. Patel turned to Susan, his brows furrowed in concern. "There's more to this," he said softly. "I can feel it. The kitten isn't just scared or hungry, something deeper is happening here." Max gave a soft, urgent bark, as if pleading for them to act before it was too late. Dr. Patel's fingers trembled slightly as he gently cradled Willow. Her tiny body was limp against his hand, her heartbeat erratic and too faint for a kitten her age. A wave of dread swept through him. Max, who had backed off just enough to let the examination continue, hovered anxiously, ears pinned back, eyes filled with unspoken urgency. Dr. Patel placed Willow on the examination table, his experienced hands moving delicately over her frail body. He listened closely with his stethoscope, his face tightening with each irregular beat. He gently examined her abdomen and chest, searching for clues. And then, he felt it. Just beneath her fragile ribcage, a subtle but unmistakable irregularity. A faint swelling, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. His breath caught. Could it be? He quickly prepared an ultrasound, his mind racing through possibilities. As the grainy image appeared on the screen, his worst fears were confirmed. There was a small, rapidly expanding fluid pocket pressing against Willow's lungs and heart. It wasn't just malnutrition or stress. This was an internal rupture, likely caused by trauma or a congenital defect, one that had gone undetected until now. The kitten's body was slowly failing. Her cries were not just from fear or loneliness, but from pain, an invisible, growing pressure that was suffocating her tiny heart. Max, with his sensitive instincts, had sensed it long before any human could. His protective embrace wasn't just comfort, it was a desperate attempt to ease her suffering. Dr. Patel's throat tightened as the realization hit him. His hands trembled on the ultrasound probe, and a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion surged through him. "Oh no," he whispered, blinking back tears. He turned to Susan, his voice barely steady. "She's in critical condition. If we don't act now, if we don't relieve the pressure, she won't make it." Max, hearing the strain in his voice, whined sharply and placed a paw gently on the table, urging them to hurry. The dog's instincts had been screaming the truth all along, and now it was a race against time. Dr. Patel swallowed hard. He glanced at Willow's glassy eyes, her feeble, gasping breaths, and then at Max, whose loyal gaze had not wavered. "She's been trying to tell us all along," he murmured. "And so is he." Dr. Patel's mind raced as he prepared for the delicate procedure that would determine whether Willow would survive. His hands moved swiftly, yet every movement was deliberate, his thoughts a tangle of fear and determination. Max stood vigil just a few steps away, head cocked slightly, watching intently. The shelter staff held their breath, eyes fixed on the trembling kitten and the determined veterinarian. As Dr. Patel began to insert a fine needle to relieve the pressure from Willow's tiny chest, his voice cracked with emotion. "Come on, little one," he murmured. "Hold on for just a bit longer." His experienced hands worked with painstaking care, his eyes glistening with the threat of tears. The moment the needle pierced the fluid pocket, a slow, clear stream of fluid drained. Willow let out a soft gasp, her tiny body arching slightly as if a weight had been lifted. Her breathing, though still shallow, grew a fraction steadier. The swelling that had nearly crushed her heart began to recede, releasing its deadly grip. Max, sensing the shift, let out a low, almost relieved whimper. His tail gave a slight, hopeful wag. The room remained hushed, filled with a fragile mixture of dread and hope. Dr. Patel's voice was thick with emotion as he turned to the staff. "She's not out of danger yet, but she's fighting." Tears welled in Susan's eyes as she knelt beside Max, resting a hand gently on his massive head. "You knew, didn't you, boy?" she whispered. "You knew she needed help." Dr. Patel removed the needle and wrapped Willow carefully in a soft towel, cradling her close to his chest. He blinked rapidly, trying to hold back his emotions, but his voice betrayed him. "It's incredible, this dog, he didn't just comfort her, he saved her life. If we hadn't listened." Max, with quiet dignity, pressed his nose against Willow's towel-wrapped form, his soft breath warming her tiny, shivering frame. The sight of his silent devotion, his unwavering loyalty, brought a fresh wave of emotion crashing through the room. Dr. Patel's shoulders trembled as he finally let the tears fall. "I've seen a lot in my years, but this bond between them, it's the purest thing I've ever witnessed." Dr. Patel worked quickly, administering medication to stabilize Willow while the staff prepared an emergency transport to the animal hospital. Max stayed close, his large, steady form like a silent guardian. Even when the medical team lifted Willow into a specialized carrier, Max refused to leave her side. His deep brown eyes followed every movement as though silently promising he would stay with her until the very end. Susan, seeing Max's unwavering determination, made a snap decision. "He's coming with us," she said firmly. "He won't rest until he knows she's safe." The team loaded Willow and Max into the van, and they sped toward the hospital, sirens wailing through the night air. Max sat beside Willow's carrier, his body tense but composed, offering silent strength. At the hospital, the veterinary team worked tirelessly to stabilize Willow. They administered fluids, oxygen, and medication to reduce the internal swelling and relieve the pressure on her tiny heart. Max waited patiently just outside the treatment room, his nose pressed against the glass, watching every move. Hours passed, each second stretching endlessly. Susan sat on the floor beside Max, her hand gently stroking his fur. "You're amazing, you know that," she whispered. "Without you, she wouldn't have had a chance." Finally, one of the vets emerged from the room, his face tired but carrying a faint smile. "She's stable," he said softly. "It'll be a long recovery, but she's strong, and with friends like him," he glanced at Max, "she's got a fighting chance." Max let out a soft, almost relieved sigh. His ears perked up, and his tail gave a small wag, as though he understood every word. The days that followed were filled with cautious optimism. Willow remained under close watch, her fragile body slowly regaining strength. Every time she stirred or let out a soft mew, Max was there, his nose pressed to her side, his soft brown eyes filled with unwavering love. It was as if his very presence was an elixir of hope for the tiny kitten. The shelter staff marveled at the transformation. Where once there was a frail, trembling kitten and a quiet, reserved German shepherd, there was now an inseparable pair whose bond defied explanation. Max's protective instincts never wavered, and Willow's once constant cries softened into contented purrs, whenever he was near.